Hello everyone and welcome back to Anything Joe's, a collaborative journey through the world of G.I. Joe. My name is Greg Engel.
And I'm Jaren Decker.
And we'll be your host today. Today on Anything Joe's, we're going to talk about the movies and the comics, our two favorite things to talk about. Let's dive straight into the news. We only got two things to talk about, but we're going to get a little long-winded on one of them for sure. So in our last episode, we talked a little bit about the G.I. Joe Transformers crossover that's hinted at in the movie. I don't feel like I'm being spoilery at this point because it's literally plastered all over the internet. But in the interest of preserving the audience, there are spoilers for the new Transformers movie starting basically right now. So at the end of the Transformers movie, the post-credits scene is a G.I. Joe hybrid. Basically, they're tying in the G.I. Joe brand into the Transformers movie universe. Jaren, you actually went to the theater and saw the Transformers movie. Can you? I'm not really super invested in Transformers, but what were your overall feelings about the movie?
So I am a product of I was growing up at the perfect time for the Transformers movie. I think I had touched on this on the last episode. I am always going to enjoy them more than I think most people probably should. It was, in my opinion, I think this one's better than all of the original Michael Bay movies, but I still liked Bumblebee more. I just thought it was a little more concise, told a little bit better story. But there are things in this movie that just like, as they've hinted at G.I. Joe, I'm like, okay, so then they have to do this. Do you want me to just go ahead and say it for you?
Yeah, I think we've been pretty clear that we're letting all the spoilers out. So if you haven't seen it, you've been warned.
So there's a human character in this Transformers movie, which happens every time, to its detriment normally. But in the final big battle at the end, he gets an exosuit that was very similar to the exosuit that they got in the G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra movie.
Okay.
And so it's made of Transformers stuff, and he's actually like just straight up fighting the big bad guy as a human, but as a Transformer. So like if you're gonna introduce G.I. Joes, they have to have that tech. Now they might not have to wear the whole suits. You might be able to yada yada it, and their weapons are infused with Cybertronian whatever, but it made it to where like, oh, okay, this is how you actually put up a fight against a Transformer. And the whole story, he's a former soldier, so it was building up from the whole movie. But I actually enjoyed the movie. I mean, my kids liked it. It was fine. There was two main human characters. There's the guy, and then there's this girl that is like a archaeologist, and she like is like figuring out the clues, like Indiana Jonesing her way through the movie. And I feel like they just didn't give her enough, so she's just really pointless for the majority of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really cool to see the Maximals and to see like, Optimus Prime will talk to Optimus Prime, and like, I wasn't a big Beast Wars kid. I guess I missed it just a little bit, but it was a fun movie, and the CGI was okay. Of that and The Flash, which I watched like at almost the same time, it had the better CGI.
I hear that's not a hard hurdle to jump.
No, it's not.
So let's talk specifically about the post-credit scene just a little bit. I doubt I can get away with playing the video on our YouTube, but I think I could probably get away with playing the audio from it and not having the Pinkertons bust down my door and confiscate my computer. So let's listen to a little bit of the post-credits scene, and then we'll talk about it.
Why don't you tell me about your strengths?
In addition to my experience with electronics, I've also been really developing my team building skills too.
That's so. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. Resume's a little thin.
Yeah, well, I just recently had a job working internationally.
Oh, was that? No, don't think it's on here.
No, it was a short-term contract.
Oh, well, that's cool. Why don't you tell me about that?
It was in South America. So I got to work on my Spanish. My mom was real happy about that. Moms, she's just really... But while I was out there, honestly, man, it was really just like work.
That's a shame, because I heard the food is really good in Peru.
Well, I didn't mention anything about Peru.
Well, that's where you were, right?
I was
down in Cusco with you and Elena and your, I don't know, call them friends.
What's going on here?
We know a lot about you, Mr. Diaz.
Who are you? Like the CIA or FBI or?
We are a secret government organization, strictly off the books. We specialize in global threats, planetary loss prevention, that kind of thing. We're in the middle of an ongoing war, and we'd love to have you join the fight. You and your whole team. You know, the big guys.
No idea what you're talking about.
That's a good answer. All right. Oh, Chris was right, by the way. No names over the airwaves. We could really use someone like you, Noah. Why don't you think about it?
You know, they don't show a lot of actual G.I. Joe stuff here. We don't know if the guy that is talking to the dude from the movie is... I don't think he's supposed to be Hawk. It's quite the left turn from what you would expect Hawk to look like. He doesn't really resemble any known G.I. Joe. And it's a possibility that they are still in such an early phase of workshopping this. This guy's probably not intended to be a specific G.I. Joe character. Much like I think that if they recruit this guy, I mean, do you think this guy would become a G.I. Joe? Is that the next step?
I guess so. I just don't know who he would be. I guess they'd have to just make him a new recruit and like an original character for the movie.
Yeah.
I did find it weird though that his name was Agent Burke. I've never noticed him to be called agents before. Is that something new in this movie?
You know, the only thing that comes to mind right away is, and this is of course because she's one of my favorite characters, but when they released Helix, her actual full like trademarked name is Agent Helix. Sometimes people will refer to her like that. So Burke's name is never spoken on screen. It's just only seen on the business card. He doesn't introduce himself basically. The director says that Burke's identity and his role in G.I. Joe were left intentionally generic, and that as of the release of the Rise of the Beast movie, he's still deciding how he wants to further develop the character, noting that Burke might not even be his real name. He could turn out to be a legacy G.I. Joe character. So, for context, no classic Joe or Cobra member carries the surname Burke. Yeah, really the only thing they give us, the only direct connection we have at all is that the G.I. Joe logo that is featured on his card is prominently noticed as it's the actual movie G.I. Joe logo. It came into being for the Rise of Cobra movie and has since been adapted on and off as the unofficial new updated G.I. Joe logo, as opposed to what we've kind of used, which has just been the actual G.I. Joe, the word G.I. Joe with the red, white, and blue stripe that we see on everything, everywhere. This was the first time they kind of had something they could slap on their vehicles that wasn't just their name. So it does probably nothing to read into. It's probably just that they wanted to be clear, hey, we're in a movie universe. This is the movie universe symbol that most people would remember first of all. But just in case you're confused, we did also write the word G.I. Joe on our business card. Our top secret organization, we did have business cards printed up. So I hope none of them fall out of our pockets or anything, because then everybody would know who we are. It would immediately blow the secret.
The only other thing I want to say is there's a phone number listed, and you know how sometimes they make like cool, like you call that number and you hear a recorded message or whatever. Yeah, they did not do that for this. I tried. I called the number and nothing happened. So I was really hoping that there'd be a fun little message or something.
I noticed that as well, but it is an iconic 555 number, which Hollywood uses anytime they want to put out a phone number that definitely does not lead to a real person's number. 555s there are no phone numbers that have the 555 as the part of the, not the area code, but the other part, the primary part. They exist specifically for throwaway numbers in the movies.
And then the other thing is, I feel like this had to have been added pretty late in the game or something, only because there is no defining G.I. Joe features in anything else other than that logo. When there's a cutaway from the wall and you reveal this big military warehouse, but there is nothing. Like, I thought for sure we'd see a vamp or Sky Striker or something, but there was nothing. There was some generic shape that looked like it was being built, and there was like a generic military Humvee, and that was it. There was no like, this is a G.I. Joe thing. So that was a little bit of a bummer. So I feel like it had to have been added fairly late into the game.
Yeah, they did not want to commit to literally any look at all. They're like, we're not showing outfits. We're not showing. Yeah, it's all extremely nondescript. The stuff that is pictured in the back is like so like hunk of metal-ish. It cannot be even established sometimes as what kind of vehicle it is. Because I noticed the same thing. I was looking for any little clues. So anyway, that's the Rise of Beasts. I guess that we'll just have to wait and see what news comes out next. You know, G.I. Joe's not had a real great time in the entertainment business lately. So until I hear that they've actually started filming, I'm not going to like get too worked up about it. Last week, we finally got a taste of some new G.I. Joe comics, but it wasn't exactly what we were expecting. Void Rivals #1, the first premiere issue from the Image and Skybound, Robert Kirkman's company, releases, and it is definitely something different. You know, they kept this secret. They were sitting on this secret for a long time. It's very hard to solicit a comic and keep even if it's just like, Ms. Marvel's going to die, which leaked almost immediately. It's tough to sit on a secret when you're soliciting a book 3 months in advance, and they did a pretty great job with Void Rivals. Not right up until it was preparing to actually release in stores did we find out that this mysterious book that tethers two universes together would be two universes that we're familiar with, the G.I. Joe and Transformers property. So we're going to take a quick look at the Void Rivals book as a whole, and then we're going to kind of talk about what our hopes are for this property. So let's take a look at Void Rivals #1. Void Rivals #1 there are 13 covers for Void Rivals #1, including a 1 in 10 variant, a 1 in 25 variant, a 1 in 50 variant, and a pretty darn pricey 1 in 100 variant. I'm also seeing several covers that are like exclusive to retailers that are limited to like 1,000 copies. I gotta be upfront, out of all of these covers, there are really none of them that are spectacular. Even the 1 in 100 variant, which I'm quite fond of, is the only variant that actually showcases a G.I. Joe or Transformer on the cover, and it is a Transformer, the one that's actually featured in the book. And it's a pretty good cover, but there are no G.I. Joe properties here, so I'm automatically a little bit like, eh. But I was pretty excited about this book right off the bat, and I thought that spec on this book would be pretty high because of Kirkman's name specifically. So right before it released, when I found out that my local comic book shop was so ineffective at doing their job, they couldn't be bothered to order any copies of this, I went online and I found a pack of both of the regular covers, the 1 in 10 cover and the blank cover. So I bought that, and then I went back and bought the 1 in 25 cover because the 1 in 25 cover is done by Karen Darboe, who is probably not a recognizable name in comics, but is actually someone that I got a digital commission from maybe 2 to 4 years ago. It's been a bit, but I was surprised to see her because I did not know her from any actual comic book work at the time when I commissioned her. I'll throw that up if I can find it today. But she did a digital commission of the Baroness for me that was extremely good. So I was surprised to see her work on this book, and I thought this was a pretty good cover. But I might be a little biased because of somebody that I'd actually worked with before. So anyway, 13 covers, all kind of meh. I'm looking at the just the basic regular retailer cover. It shows two people split in half, connected together, and they are kind of like the two new main protagonists of this story. I don't have a lot else to say about this. I don't think these covers are particularly inviting or gripping in any way.
I like the basic one. When you read the book and you see that the duality of them, and you get the name, the Void Rivals part, you get the Rivals part. I think it's kind of cool. I mean, it's definitely not. This is not something I'm going to be like, oh yeah, this is going to go up. I'm going to hang it up. But I think it's a pretty cool. It kind of works with what the content of the books is, which is always nice, because normally it's not the case. But they're okay. The regular one is actually probably my favorite. And then there's the second printing variant covers that they're doing that I think are probably better than any of the original covers. The monster at the end of the book, Grover cover that has Jetfire on the front is very, very good and is definitely a cover that I want to add to my collection. I think it releases here in the next couple of weeks, but it went to second printing right away, which I guess
says good things about it, at least there are people that are, that are interested in it. Hopefully it's not just people piling on to resell it. It's actually going to have some pretty strong numbers, and that will boost the property overall, I think. We're not going to cover this the way we normally cover our comics. I'm just going to we're going to kind of breeze through it in very broad strokes. So if you are planning on reading it yourself, although we're going to cover all the basics, I'm not going to cover every single line of dialogue like we usually do with these. So let's take a look. Void Rivals #1, written by Robert Kirkman. Artist is Lorenzo De Felici. Book starts out on a kind of deserted planet. There we see the wreckage of a craft as a fist breaks through the canopy of it. There's a guy that crawls out. He kind of is robotic looking. He reminds me of Brendan Fraser's character from Doom Patrol. Yes. Is what it makes me think of. It's kind of like just a human form, but a very robotic body. He crawls for a little robotic life support machine that comes out and helps him kind of regather some health, and they have a little bit of a dialogue about what happened, where are we? They've been knocked off course. They crash landed on a planet. He's surveying the damage when somebody strikes out at him, and we see a long panel reveal that somebody else is on this planet and is clearly interested in him and his ship. They have a quick encounter, and it is revealed that they're kind of like they're enemies. There's a real strong... Jaren, have you ever seen the 80s action movie Enemy Mine?
I have not.
It's like a human and an alien that are at war with each other. They get stranded on a place together and have to kind of work together to survive, and they bond over it. Real strong vibes of that here. They fight. They come to a bit of a draw. They reach the realization that if they're going to survive, they will have to work together. So they go back to this person's ship, and they think maybe our two broken ships together, we can get one working ship and we can get out of here. They work on that for a little while, and with some mixed results, their little experiment catches fire, and they realize they've lost even more parts. They decide that they're going to scavenge the planet a little bit to see if they can find any remains. They have a bit of a disagreement. One of them walks off, comes running back and says, "Hey, you're not going to believe what I found, but you got to come with me right now and check it out." They walk over the horizon and they find a broken down spaceship in the rubble. I did not recognize this ship when I saw it. They power up a small booster cell to it. They think they can basically like jumpstart it a little bit. And that they do. They give it a little power boost. It turns over more or less, and it transforms. And I believe this guy's name is Jetfire. I truly do not know anything about Transformers. But he's a jet ship. He transforms, and he's like, "Where am I?" They have a short interaction with him, but he introduces himself as Jetfire. He doesn't know how long he's been there, what's going on. There's a thing that says, "I've been stranded here for millions of years." Doesn't know what happened to Cybertron, et cetera, et cetera. He's very confused. Doesn't hang around, just transforms into the jet and flies away and leaves them cold. So they are still stranded. They have some more discussions with one another. They do something that is, I guess, strictly prohibited in their individual societies. They remove their helmets. And so they see that they are basically very similar. They're both humanoids. They have gems on their foreheads, and one is like a red, kind of Mr. Sinister looking gem, and the other is like green, more rectangular looking gem. The guy, Caesar, they're both surprised to see they're both so humanoid. He says, "Well, we're the same. It's just like my vision." The other occupant, which I failed to mention is female, says, "What vision?" And that's the end of the first issue. So again, no G.I. Joes in this book at all. I mean, we know they're coming, but as far as this setup goes, we don't know what's going on. We don't really know what's going on here, and we don't really know how far. Actually, sorry, before I get into all that, there's some advertising at the end that says, the next book is on sale on July 19th, book 2. We see the preview cover for that, which has nothing, specifically revealing about it. And then there's an ad for the other books in this series, which we've also, had learned about previously. Daniel Warren Johnson launches a Transformers book in October 2023. Joshua Williamson is launching he's carrying both a Duke and Cobra Commander book, which launches December and January. And those 3 books, I guess, are meant to help fill in the universe that, it's hard to take 2 existing properties and then also a 3rd new property, get them all to fit in a 22-page monthly and still make everybody happy, right? Like, obviously, us, the guys that are only here for G.I. Joe content, we're all kind of bummed because we didn't even get a single glance at what they would look like. But in all fairness, we get 2 books, a good guy and a bad guy book, and they only get 1 book for the Transformers. So we'll see. So a couple of questions about this book, Jaren, as we kind of try to figure it out. We don't know how long Jetfire's been trapped on. That's the only real clue we have into the timeline, is that he seems to think he's been trapped for millions of years. But we don't know from when. I don't know the exact details on how old Cybertron is, but I know the Transformers have been around for absolutely forever. So it's feasible that this is supposed to be a newly imagined universe where the Transformers and G.I. Joe have never met, which isn't that hard to believe considering most G.I. Joe and Transformers crossovers kind of start fresh. It's almost always told from a continuity standpoint where they have never encountered each other. There's a couple that connect, but I can think of, at least half a dozen stories where they are starting fresh or they are working from a continuity that is completely unique to its story. Like, there's a great one where it's told kind of like, what if G.I. Joe and Transformers met each other in World War II? So they're doing their own thing. So I'm wondering if this will be a similar concept. Are they building everything from the ground up, and the Duke and Cobra Commander stories are meant to kind of like flesh out this basically new continuity looks like? Or how much will they be pulling from the past stuff that we've seen? How much do you want for them to pull from that stuff? I think it's safe to say they probably won't mess with Larry's run much, since we know that it's continuing. So where do you think the basis for this G.I. Joe continuity is coming from, Jaren? Or do you think he's just going to throw everything out the window and build his own world, essentially?
Well, Joshua Williamson's doing both the 2 kind of like side books for G.I. Joe, and I love Joshua Williamson. He's doing a lot of stuff for DC right now. He's doing the Superman book, which is like it's made me more of a Superman fan than I've ever been. So, and with it, if I can glean any information from his approach to that, it seems like he kind of took it back to the basics with Superman, and I'm hoping that he does that with G.I. Joe. So I'm hoping that he just kind of pulls from like the original stories, and especially with Larry being there, maybe getting his input and just kind of getting input, but not actually like, oh, this is a continuation or anything like that. But because he's also being able to tell his own story. So I would like to see him kind of respect what has been set before, but not be beholden to only telling something we've already seen. It's very exciting to see that we're going to get both. Has there ever been a G.I. Joe comic about from the villain's perspective, from Cobra's perspective?
They did some stuff in the Image years. There's a Cobra Reborn one shot that was supposed to kind of reboot this new continuity. But for the most part, probably not. Certainly not, I don't think exclusively. And definitely not as an ongoing. The IDW did a run where it was they were looking for a replacement for Cobra Commander, and it was running in all of these books. There was at least 3 ongoing G.I. Joe books at this time, and every one of them was based on this story. So there was like 6 people running to be the new Cobra Commander, and each book was kind of focusing on what they were doing. And in that sense, in the early books, in the early pages at least, they were kind of the POV of what every villain was doing, because they crossed paths and you'd see it from different people's POV. But again, I still think that I'm going to assume that this is supposed to be a origin story for Cobra Commander, so it's probably not taking place continuity-wise the same time as Void Rivals is. I'm under the impression that these books will be used to flesh out the universe, kind of previously. I don't think that they are going to be taking place at the same time, basically. If they are, I think that's going to complicate things a little bit, because I'm not 100% that I want to start buying this Transformers comic. But if I have to, you feel kind of compelled if it's all tied into the same continuity at the same time. So I don't know. I might try a couple, but I'm really not that interested in buying a Transformers book. When IDW did Revolutions, which is where they put all the properties in together, I felt a similar thing where I was buying books I didn't really want to read and wasn't really enjoying, but they would constantly be using G.I. Joe stuff, so I felt like I kind of had to. Like in Mask, there's a story arc where Zartan like infiltrates their team, and in ROM, the astronaut countdown is like part of their main crew. So every book had a little bit of like, I mean, they did it on purpose. They wanted me, a G.I. Joe enthusiast, to feel like I had to buy them all, and I did, but I didn't enjoy doing it like that. It just there wasn't enough G.I. Joe stuff in it for me. You know, I'd buy a book and count down and only say 3 sentences, and I'd think, well, geez, that's $5 down the tubes. So, yeah, hopefully if they are all integrated, it'll be done in a way where I don't feel like I'm wasting my money, or at least where I don't feel like I have to read every single thing that they put out. But I know the comic books universe doesn't really work like that. It's a cash cow, and they want you to, why just get you hooked on one book when we can get you hooked on 4, I guess would be the concept of it. But yes, I'm of the mindset that the Duke and Cobra Commander book, and probably the Transformers book as well, will work in the past to some degree to help build out the universe that they're working at currently in Void Rivals, just to help tell the tale. I don't know how you write a Cobra Commander story otherwise. How do you tell a villain story in modern continuity when they're the opposing force? I just don't think it would work any other way. But I guess we'll see. You're right, Joshua Williamson. You know, I did a cursory glance at stuff that he's worked on that I've read, and he did a lot of the Rebirth, New 52 era Flash stuff, which I'm a big fan of. And you know, Daniel Warren Johnson is quite the hot name in comics stuff. He's done lots of things that have been very extremely well received.
Daniel Warren Johnson did my favorite short story I've ever read in a comic. Once again, he did a Superman. He did for Superman Red and Blue issue 5, I believe. And there's a story that he did, and the fact that it, you know, this little solicitation shows it's just by Daniel Warren Johnson makes me excited, because I love his art style. So it looks like he's going to be writing and doing the art, which is pretty cool. I can't imagine the amount of work that all these comic creators are doing, you know, because like Joshua Williamson will have both of these books. He's got, you know, probably, I think he's doing 3 or 4 for DC. And then, you know, like there's just all this stuff going on. So, but I would say I'm kind of excited for this, because I'm already ready to just start pulling all 4. Like I am more of a Transformers person than you are. I'm still not I would not say that I am like 100% a Transformers person, but I enjoy them and I like them. And the fact that I'll be getting into a new continuity made by a creator that I absolutely love, or written and drawn by a creator I absolutely love. And this first issue of Void Rivals actually got me more than I thought it would. I thought I was going to read this and just be like, oh, well, I didn't see anything G.I. Joe, so this is dumb. But it's actually a fun little story. It's going to be, I want to see what's going on. I want to see the story of these people and their race. Because, you know, throughout the whole book, they're talking about like, oh, well, you know, the one main character has like an AI or something talking to him, or a software talking to him, and he's like, well, you're not allowed to say that to them, or you're not allowed to talk about that, or you know, and even the one character says, well, I'm not even supposed to be allowed to hear that AI's voice. So it's kind of a cool story. It's going to be cool to see what's going on and how they work this all out. You know, because if they are trying to put all of it together, it's gonna be nuts.
I really love Robert Kirkman, and I think he's an extremely talented writer. And I've enjoyed many things that he's written over the years. Have enjoyed. Obviously, The Walking Dead, which I think as a read is very good. Invincible is extremely good. He did some work on Ultimate Marvel Team Up, stands out. He did some writing on that. He was a big Darkhawk fan and wrote some Darkhawk stuff here and there, which I thought was really good. And Sleepwalker also. So, I have a lot of faith in his ability. I think he's a very creative and fresh writer. He hasn't really been writing stuff very consistently because he's fabulously wealthy from The Walking Dead. He doesn't really have to. So I do hope that he sticks with this, and that, you know, maybe because he's writing something that I'm sure he's been very vocal about what a G.I. Joe and Transformers fan he is. So it's kind of a dream project for him. I'm hoping that will ratchet up his involvement in it, 1,000%. He's not flawless. And when I look at this, I made a lot of very simple comparisons to other things in the entertainment business that reminds me of. And the movie Enemy Mine is real strong. This also has very strong saga vibes. A comic about two warring alien races that fall in love with each other, even though they've been strictly prohibited to. And I see a lot of that in this. So I hope it sets its own path. And I am interested in this story, but again, I don't want to get so tied down into this. There's they're like falling in love, and Snake Eyes is in the back like, hey guys, we're in the middle of a battle. Also, I can talk in this comic. I hope that doesn't make the fans really mad. So yeah, I mean, I got a lot of hopes for this. If you're going to do a reboot, and I think they pretty much are, he's probably just going to keep some of the beats that he liked the best about G.I. Joe, and he's going to try to probably modernize the rest of it. And that is the purpose of the two new books. You're not really just writing continuing adventures anymore. I'm going to also take a guess and say, because of what we've seen so far, that there's going to be an awful lot of like intergalactic, interstellar aspects of this. They are probably going to be in space a lot, right? Or maybe this is set in a much further flung future where they are, these characters were only recently born, and we're seeing them in, 21, 22 or something. And that would be a complete re-envisioning that, they weren't war people at all. But it's hard to imagine that this takes place in a metropolitan area based on the fact that we've seen nothing of that to boot. And we've got two essentially alien races, and we've got a robot entity. So that alone is just like way outside the normal, the right. I'm not saying it never happens, but when we think about G.I. Joe, we're typically setting everything up in kind of a military standard with a little bit of science fiction thrown in. This is a ton of science fiction with maybe just a little bit of military thrown in. So who knows, Jaren? Maybe you'll get to see your space boys. Maybe you'll get to see Robo Joe just based on the fact that everything is so technologically advanced. It would be awesome to hear like a Predacon or, the Black Stars, anything that they, would theoretically fit into this universe. Even if it's reimagined, it would be nice to see some of that in there. I guess we'll find out just how hardcore of a fan Kirkman really is, if he's going to give us some deep cuts or if he's just going to do the same old classified wave one roll call, Duke, Roadblock, Snake Eyes, Scarlet, the end. Those are the only people that are on the G.I. Joe team, just our heavy hitters.
I'm about to have to start tweeting him every day. I don't know how active he is on Twitter. Just every day, hey, please use Star Brigade. Hey, please use Star Brigade. And just keep at him.
Every day I'll just send him a picture of Starduster until he shows up in the comic. So anyway, that's Void Rivals #1. I think it's a very good read, and it does have a lot of potential. I'm always very, very hesitant about starting a new continuity. We don't talk about this a lot, but ever since I was a kid, I feel a tremendous amount of pressure to merge all of the continuities of G.I. Joe. I don't like anything that's good being left out. So my personal Joe-verse has got I've done a lot of mental juggling to make all the continuities kind of work. Obviously you can't keep everything because some people are alive and some people are dead in different universes, but I try to take every good idea and cram it in there. And so that's another thing I'm interested in, is seeing what kind of stuff this brings to the plate. Is this stuff that I can use in my own Joe-verse, or will it give me ideas to run along with? I'm certainly not opposed to the science fiction setting. I just think it has to be done very well. Otherwise, you really start to lose everything. You start to lose all the military aspects of G.I. Joe, and then you've tipped the needle. I don't think in my perfect G.I. Joe world doesn't go too far into any realm. I know a lot of very vocal G.I. Joe enthusiasts want their G.I. Joe stuff to be very strict, realistic military, and I like that as much as the next guy, but you just got to have just a little drip of, cloning the 7 greatest creators in the world, or a little bit of, hey, we ran into an alien that has 4 arms and collects bounties. Like, just a little bit of the good craziness, I think, is what makes G.I. Joe such a wild property. So it's so much fun to come back to, is that they leave the door open just a little bit to say, hey, you got something crazy in your imagination? We left a spot for you here. Come on into the G.I. Joe verse and see how it looks on you. So anyway, highly recommended. We'll talk more about Void Rivals as it releases. I don't think we will do a book by book analysis of it unless you guys feel strongly about that. We would be open to it if you feel like it's worth the time to cover individually. Or maybe you're just too cheap and lazy to buy them yourself and you want us to tell you what happens. And you know what? I got no problem with that. You can write us and let us know how you feel about that. You can leave us a comment in our YouTube section. You can write our email at anythingjoespod or anythingjoespodcast@gmail.com. You can reach out to Jaren on Instagram at anythingjoespod, or you can contact me on our Twitter at anythingjoespod. And we would love to hear from you. What are your hopes for the Void Rival series? Have you read it? What are your thoughts on what you've seen so far? Who do you hope they use and in what way? I'd be interested in hearing, everybody's thoughts on this new title. One thing's for sure, this book has got a lot of eyes on it. And I think there's a lot of people that got a lot of optimism. So it will be bringing in people that are not normal G.I. Joe fans. There are people that are probably just like me, but for Transformers, they're like, I don't want to see any G.I. Joes. Maybe they'll be won over by it. Or maybe there'll be people that are just looking for a good science fiction story and it'll revitalize their love of these old properties. Or, maybe they'll become new fans. It seems harder and harder to make people G.I. Joe enthusiasts in this day and era that, didn't already have an attachment to it before. Maybe this is the thing that does it. We'll just have to wait and see. So that's going to do it for us today. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back in 2 short weeks with more news coverage, comic book discussions, and the things from the collection. We hope you'll join us then, where anything's available for discussion here on Anything Joe's.